Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Nick.
And I'm Alastair.
And small content warning, my sexy radio voice might be a bit off today as I'm pretty sure I have a cold. And that aside, this episode we will be talking about the new series of Doctor Who, the first actual whole new series we've got to cover on this podcast, and the last series for, well, the current Doctor, Peter Capaldi, the current showrunner, Stephen Moffat, possibly also the first and last series for the current companion, although they're being a bit coy about that. We've then got the new Fast and Furious film, which of course is called Fast and Furious 8 in the UK, because we always get the boring titles, but in the US is known as 8 Fast, 8 Furious. And we'll then be discussing, for the third time on this show, the third season of Better Call Saul, and then we'll be doing my recommendation from last time, which was the first storyline or two of Ultimate Spider-Man by Brian Bendis and Mark Bagley, a formative comic from the early years of the 2000s. But before all of that, Alastair, what else have you been consuming in the last fortnight?
Well, I have a recommendation from something that we both saw a while ago. If you think back to last year when we were talking about the London Film Festival, we reviewed a film called Spaceship, a really interesting, unusual, low-budget British sort of science fiction film.
The trippy teeny one.
Yeah, the one with the teenagers, and it's quite strange, and there's, the sort of, one of them gets abducted by aliens, or you're not really sure, or disappear. Yeah, as that was quite an unusual film, and it was a film we saw at the London Film Festival, and there's a lot of like kind of small independent films that you see there that kind of you see there and then you never see again. I just thought it'd be good if anyone liked what they heard about that film. It's now available on BFI Player. So if you go to the BFI website, British Film Institute, they have an online player where you can watch films, and they have unusual and offbeat films. And according to their website, Spaceship has been added. I hope to have time to rewatch it. Between our busy Better Call Saul and Doctor Who schedule, I haven't actually had time to rewatch it. But I am looking forward to seeing it again because it was very good.
I always struggle to remember these things we see in great detail, like 6 months to a year later. But I do remember that giving me a good sort of warm, trippy feeling, that being on the right side of weird rather than just this is weird for the sake of it.
Yeah, and it had some really nice characters that were really relatable. It was a great sort of portrait of what it's like to be a teenager, the sort of sitting around kind of looking for sort of purpose, or and trying to figuring out what you thought about the world. I would recommend that if anyone's looking for an unusual film to watch.
That was some top level recycling of content. Well done.
So Nick, what have you been up to recently?
Well, continuing a couple of strands I've mentioned before as well, so yeah, this isn't going to be the most fresh recommendation section, sorry. I have finished the second book of Jerusalem by Alan Moore, the epic novel by the famous bearded comic writer. The first book, which I think I talked a bit about when I finished it in our Logan special with Chris Brosnahan, it featured an anthology of different stories set in the same area of Northampton throughout time. The second chunky book, it's technically one novel, but I'm basically reading it like a trilogy in order to make it seem finishable. It helps that it's published in a 3-book slipcase. Follows one of the characters from book 1 as they transcend to a 4th-dimensional realm where they can see everything that happened in book 1 sort of at once, and everything sort of blurs together. So, yeah, to give Alan Moore his credit, I read book 1 thinking, these are some interesting sort of novella-length short stories, but I don't really see how they're going to come together, and apparently the answer was, in book 2, they transcend to a 4th-dimensional realm. So, fair enough, Alan. I should never have doubted you.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty epic undertaking, this book. I guess it's similar to like Lord of the Rings, how Lord of the Rings is sort of, there's 3 books, but it is considered to be one novel.
I guess so, yeah. A lot of trilogies seem to blow into that a bit. I mean, I gather you people now buy His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman as one massive novel rather than 3 individual ones.
That's how I read it, actually.
Yeah, which reminds me, I was going to reread that before I gather he's releasing another book. I haven't actually worked out if it's a sequel or a prequel, but there's another book in that universe coming in October, I think.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I've seen like blackboards up in bookshops telling me to pre-order it, so yeah, that's a literary event. But yeah, anyway, Jerusalem by Alan Moore. Yeah, it's the second book is actually a continuous novel. Like it's sort of a novel within the novel about this kid. Yeah, well, whatever. This child from book 1. Well, you see him at various stages in his life, but the version that's in book 2 is the child one, who is sort of on this long, rambling tour of this other realm with these group of other ghost children, who I think are sort of inspired by, like, the Bash Street Kids or something. A lovable, scrappy gang of misfit kids who keep talking about how much trouble they get into, but ultimately their heart's in the right place. And they go on this little sort of ghost adventure throughout time and the afterlife, and there's some angels and there's more of Alan Moore's cosmology, which I'm not going to try and explain again. It's still an interesting book. I was wondering whether this was going to be a rambling, ponderous epic that I just got bored of, but so far it's actually holding me impressively well.
Is it still focusing on working class characters, which you said was one of the features of the first volume?
Yeah. I mean, it is impressive, even now that he's got to this sort of, we're in another reality level of fantasy. The bits of the world they're looking in on are still a more working class section, because they're still focusing quite heavily on this one quite working class area of Northampton and how it's punished and ground under heel over the course of the years because people have increasing contempt for the working class. Perhaps not a cheerful view of the future there, because as the consensus as we look down on this area of Northampton from the fourth dimension is, things just keep getting worse. But, a sort of long, ponderous literary fiction, I guess I wasn't really expecting it to be that cheerful.
Cool. Well, check back in when you've read the third volume.
I seem to be at the rate of about one a month, so yeah, hopefully sometime sort of late May, early June, we'll see what I thought of the whole damn thing. First up, and at long last, a new whole series of Doctor Who, the first one since Series 9, which I think aired in 2015, annoyingly just before we started this podcast. And yes, this is Series 10. This features Peter Capaldi's final year as Doctor, Stephen Moffat's final year as showrunner, and interestingly, rather than bring long-standing storylines to an end, they've kind of done that already over the last few years, and this feels like a very fresh start for a creative regime that is about to leave. Like the first episode we saw, the first episode of Series 10 was called The Pilot. There is a pilot in the plot, but it's also clearly a sort of a reference to the fact that the episode itself is a bit of a V-pilot. It's very focused on introducing the new companion as a relatable, down-to-earth character, and setting up the Doctor's new status quo as lecturer in a university where he meets the new companion Bill, who works in the cafeteria and has an inquiring mind and sort of sneaks into his lectures. And yep, we've seen their first two adventures. Alastair, what did you think?
I liked it so far. Strangely, it seemed to remind me of kind of Russell T Davies era Doctor Who. It kind of reminded me of the sort of like beginning of Series 3 or Series 4. They introduce a new companion in sort of contemporary Earth with a one-off adventure with his character meeting the Doctor. The end, the Doctor decides that he quite likes this new person and decides to take them off on much more far-flung adventures. The second one, again, was sort of a self-contained story with a new one-off villain set in a specific location. There wasn't much hint of, like, a big arc plot.
Well, there's a bit. There's this vault they keep talking about.
Yeah, they kind of teased, like, a few things, but compared to, like, some Stephen Moffat series, like is it Series 6 with the astronaut coming out of the lake? Sometimes they do like clearly throw out like a huge plot line straight away, which was always thought was a signature of Stephen Moffat, like kind of this emphasis on big complex plot.
I don't know if it feels like Russell T Davies specifically. It just felt, as I say, a bit more like a sort of relaunch or pilot. Like if Stephen Moffat's first series as showrunner, his first two episodes were very similar to this. One episode in contemporary Earth introducing Amy Pond, and then they went straight to the far-flung future. So it's not that he can't do it, it's that he only did it once, and every year since then has been right straight into the plot. Which is partly because he hasn't had that many, here's a new series with a new companion. Like the Ponds stayed for 2.5 years, and then Clara sort of appeared in a slightly odd way and then stayed for 2.5 years. So, yeah, this is the second opportunity he's had to do that, just as he's leaving.
Yeah, and I think it works really well. Like, I like the new companion. She's very relatable. She's, an interesting character. So, yeah, she's got that kind of, brings out, like, different perspective, because usually, like, the Doctor knows everything and is kind of explaining things and sorting things out. It's important to find, like, a specific role for the companion. Sort of, like, provide knowledge the Doctor doesn't have, or provide skills the Doctor doesn't have, or, like, just to provide, like, an alternative perspective. The companion needs to, like, bring something to the dynamic. And I think Bill does have... it's difficult to put a finger exactly what it is, because we've only had like 2 episodes, and I guess we're still seeing how the relationship between these characters develops.
Yeah, but I think a lot of it is this sort of sense of curiosity, and also this sort of entertaining cultural awareness that she has. This sort of, why is the chair not next to the console? Can you stretch your arm like Mr. Fantastic? She feels like a realistic contemporary person. She feels rounded and three-dimensional. And to be honest, in some ways it's probably good that you can't just describe her in like 2 or 3 words with like her one key characteristic or her job or whatever, because I know that was one of the big complaints people had about especially Clara, but she wasn't really that well-rounded a character. She was just this sort of companion archetype.
Yeah, it helped that the first episode focused around Bill's relationship with another student at the university, or with a student at the university, because Bill works at the university. I mean, yeah, the first episode, I don't know if how spoilery we want to get, but...
I think we can be moderately spoilery. I think the once we get to the point where, by the time this goes out, both episodes we're discussing will have been out for nearly a week. It's Doctor Who. If you care, you've probably seen it within a week or so. But yes, if you haven't seen the first 2 episodes of Series 10 Doctor Who, be aware we might spoil what happens.
Yeah. Well, I'll try and not deliberately spoil, just only when necessary. But in the first episode, the alien creature, the mystery that they're trying to solve, sort of attached itself to a student that Bill likes at the university in a sort of, Bill likes in a romantic way. The fact that this first episode is based very much around the kind of the mystery plot is related to how Bill relates to another character allows the sort of the story to draw out more of Bill's personality, what she's like, through very human things like, having a crush on someone or, meeting someone for the first time, and like that story that we're all familiar with from our lives and from other works of fiction. So having like kind of this first story built around Bill's relationship with another character, we got more of her personality, see what she's like in her natural environment. I think sometimes that can be like someone's just walking along and the Doctor comes down and swoops them up and takes them away. I did feel that was the problem with the second Tennant companion, the Freya Agyeman one, Martha. Quite early on, you see her in like sort of science fiction setting, which means like you kind of don't really get a lot of her like everyday life. I think they did quite well with Rose, kind of setting up what her everyday life is like, before she leaves in the TARDIS.
Yeah, and the villain was maybe a bit light, but the fact that Bill cared about this other student, Heather, did at least mean you sort of cared a little bit about the plot. Like, the villain was literally a sentient puddle, but the emotion around it did sort of crystallise. I cared whether the Heather character was dead, and, fair enough, they did go the whole way and actually kill her. Like all Doctor Who emotional moments, it was perhaps a bit overscored with soaring music, but they've been doing that for years, so I guess that's here to stay. Similarly, the bit towards the end of the episode where they have an argument about wiping her mind, that was pleasantly tangible for a sort of sci-fi thing. Like, the Doctor is allowed to be wrong, which is, a good thing, and it's about something that feels like it actually matters, rather than should I pull the switch that destroys the Ardon Empire or something equally nebulous. It felt some degree of emotionally resonant. I mean, I know people have talked about whether it's an in-story criticism of the Doctor wiping Donna's mind years and years ago. I have no idea. But yeah, it was a nice moment in this specific episode.
Yeah, exactly. And it was a great moment between the two characters when the Doctor realises that Bill's important to him and they've become friends. The second episode was also was an interesting one. I think they found a pretty cool sci-fi place to film it. I'm pretty sure that was shot in Valencia in Spain, which is pretty sci-fi looking city. Yeah, it was an interesting one when they had they do the thing that Doctor Who does very well, which is to, make inanimate objects or things that aren't really human sort of quite scary. Stephen Moffat really has a talent for writing, bringing statues or masks and things to life in a kind of quite creepy way.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed that episode. I thought the first half hour, which was basically a two-hander between the Doctor and Bill, I don't think anyone else speaks except for a tiny scene with a couple of colonists being killed and 2 lines from Matt Lucas, the Nardole character, who is also quite fun. It's hard to come up with reams of things to say about him. Anyway, the first half hour of the second episode, which was called Smile, I think, was mostly just the two-hander between the Doctor and Bill, and it was very, very good and charming, and the sort of patter between them, both slowly unravelling the mystery and establishing their sort of rapport, worked quite nicely, I think. Like a lot of the other episodes, they throw them in and there's a bunch of new guest stars for them to talk to, which, again, works as a way of establishing the character fine. But yeah, I thought it was an impressive choice that's paid off pretty well to just have them sort of talk to each other pretty much in a vacuum for most of that episode until the plot turned up at the very end. And that was a bit of a rush to the finish, really. I didn't feel the last 15 minutes quite as hard as I felt the first half hour. It was all decent enough.
The Doctor and Bill are very watchable on screen together, which bodes well for the rest of this series. The episode really reminded me of a Alastair Reynolds novel called On the Steel Breeze, which has a pretty similar plot, which is that humans are colonising another world. The colonist ship is travelling there and they've sent on, robots have been sent ahead to kind of, arrive at the planet and make it sort of habitable for humans, so while the humans get there, and then the robots rebel for complicated reasons against the humans and set traps for them as they arrive. Yeah, and it's a good story. It's a good bit of science fiction. One thing about Doctor Who, which is some people criticise Doctor Who for, and I think is a possibly an unfair criticism, is that it's not sci-fi enough. You say it's more like science fantasy. There's not a lot of scientific basis in the stuff that happens, which, it's not really in the spirit of Doctor Who. Doctor Who is about telling these incredible stories and going to unusual places. The fact that the science can be a bit ropey is just kind of part of the fun, or, the science bends to necessitate story. But this one, Smile, was actually, I thought, based in, similar to, harder science fiction that I've read.
Yeah, it's not the first time that Stephen Moffat has used the sort of, this episode was actually written by Frank Cottrell Boyce, but it's one of these things where, you sort of automatically credit it to the showrunner in your mind somehow, which is very possibly unfair. But anyway, yeah, I don't know to what degree, Stephen Moffat comes up with the concepts and then they knock out the script, or whether, this is just Frank Cottrell Boyce coming up with a slightly Moffatian concept. But yeah, the idea of technology that was programmed to do one thing and then sort of rebels or gets it wrong in a dangerous way is something he's definitely done before. I mean, his first two-parter with gas masks, Are You My Mummy? That one. That had a very similar sort of baddie, which, to be fair, may just be because it's a very sort of straight science fiction thing to do, rather than because of anything specific about Stephen Moffat's psyche.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I can see the comparisons.
Wasn't this one about the clockwork droids from the second series also quite similar?
Yeah, and again, like I say, there's a sort of Moffat thing of using the uncanny, kind of something that kind of looks a bit human but isn't a bit human in a sort of scary way. There's definitely a lot of the uncanny in his writing, which was present in this episode. It's present in the angels. It's present in the clockwork robots that were in Capaldi's first adventure as the Doctor, I believe, as well as that David Tennant episode in the second series. He's good at that, and again, so is this other writer. Like I say, it's difficult to substantiate exactly who he came up with what, but it's certainly a Moffatian concept, I think, as you say, that is kind of very much in his style of Doctor Who. But I thought they were good villains. Yeah, the whole thing was quite scary in a sort of tense, uncanny Doctor Who way.
Yeah, again, I felt that once it got to the end, and well, to be fair, the bit where he hits the recess and does the speech about the magic fish was quite nice as well. I thought it perhaps lost a bit of its sort of bounciness and charm once, the other characters turned up and the Doctor started having to actually deal with the plot rather than just having this extended back and forth about it. But, it was still quite a nice resolution. Certainly, I think Frank Cottrell Boyce wrote an episode called In the Forest of the Night in the latter half of Capaldi's first series, which was a bit vague and washy and didn't seem to really go anywhere. I don't know, this was definitely better than that, I think.
Is this the one when there's loads of plants everywhere for no reason?
That's the one.
You're right, this was better than that episode, which, I don't know, the story didn't come off in that previous one. I just felt it kind of lacked tension. There was kind of an initial mystery of, why are there, loads of plants everywhere? And then nothing really happened. Then at the end, the plants went away. And as you say, the fact that most of the episode was just the Doctor and Bill together, and they were very watchable, makes me feel quite quietly confident that the rest of the series could be at least of that quality. Then it would be good. They're bringing back the original sort of 1960s Cybermen from the very first time the Doctor encountered the Cybermen.
I mean, that sounds like it's going to be a bit of a old-timey wank-off, but, it's Stephen Moffat's last series. If he wants to have a wank-off, he can. I mean, I don't know. I don't follow the sort of behind-the-scenes gossipy stuff as much as I perhaps have done in the past. I have sort of reached the sort of sad, cynical stage of my adult life where I ignore a lot of the ephemera and just watch the shows. But I do get the feeling that Moffat kind of thought he was leaving, or at least strongly suspected he was leaving at the end of Series 9, and then seems to be sort of staying on as caretaker, perhaps because I think Chris Chibnall, the incoming showrunner, is busy with finishing off Broadchurch. Again, based on very small interview snippets, it did feel like Stephen Moffat perhaps felt a bit of the sort of overwhelming pressure of it all at various points in his run, and this one feels a bit lighter somehow. It feels like, with one series to go and no pressure to, avoid being fired or do anything really except just produce some fun episodes, he seems to have a certain freedom and lightness to it. It seems a lot more enjoyable. So,
yeah.
To be fair, I'm being a dick implicitly about past series. I liked Series 9 quite a lot, so I'm not actually saying that wasn't enjoyable.
Yeah, Series 9 was very good. That was the one when almost every story was a two-parter. Yeah, there was some really good, detailed storytelling going on, which the greater scope allowed for in that series. But, I think it'd be great if Moffat can do one last really solid, self-contained series. He can bow out on a high.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that makes me feel good about this whole Vault mystery. It's not as if he could stretch it over years. It's going to be a one-series mystery, and it's about the right level to be a one-series mystery. As long as it's not something incredibly stupid. I mean, maybe, I don't know, it'll probably end up being the John Sim Master in a pod or something, or maybe it's, the next generation of the Doctor, who knows. But as long as it's something, fun, which sparks off another story, that's fine.
The other significant thing about this series is that Bill is the first LGBT companion they've had.
If you ignore Captain Jack.
I suppose Captain Jack, is he full companion or was he semi-companion? I don't know how this...
Well, we're getting into tiers here. I think he's definitely a companion. He just didn't have his name in the credits and he didn't do a full series.
Yeah, I think there's some sort of thing where, like, I think anyone who's been in the TARDIS when it moves technically makes you a companion or something. I don't really know. But yeah, there's an interesting new dimension they brought to the character. Certainly her relationship with Heather in the first episode was a well-handled storyline that had a sort of strong emotional core to it that I liked. It'd be interesting to see that if that's going to be the only time that Bill's sexuality is looked at in any way. It was just like in that first episode. I don't know how much it's likely to feature in future episodes, but it certainly was handled, I thought, well in the first episode.
Yeah, I mean, again, comparing it to Russell T Davies, there was a lightness of touch around it, which is similar to how he handled these things. You know, it's not really made a fuss of, it's not really made an issue, or at least it hasn't yet. I don't know if that's coming. She just is gay, and therefore the character she fancies is a woman rather than a man, and fair enough. I mean, if you're going to show other sexualities in mainstream shows in a very, this is normal, this is just like everything else way, then that's the way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I really liked about the first episode is a brief cameo. It was a blink and you miss it moment from the Movellans, a villain from classic Doctor Who. There's a bit in the first episode when they travel, I'm not sure if it's into the future or the past. They visit the Daleks whilst they're trying to escape from the villain in the first episode, and clearly during one of the Dalek-Movellan wars that take place in classic Doctor Who. The Movellans are another machine, sort of cyborg-based warrior race that are locked in a constant, never-ending war with the Daleks. And it comes up several times in classic Doctor Who. It was nice to see that they made the effort when the Daleks were attacking something to have it actually be something that would resonate with fans, that fans would stop and go like, oh, I recognise that, if you're a fan of classic Doctor Who, rather than having just the Daleks just attacking people or a more well-known villain like the Cybermen or what have you.
The Dalek cameo was, I don't know, it perhaps floated a bit close to being a sort of another bit of slightly over the top, I'm doing this because it's cool Moffat self-indulgence, but it was kind of fun. And if you view this as a sort of the pilot for the show, it's kind of nice to see them in some weird level. Although it is kind of odd, the relationship the show seems to have developed with the Daleks, in that they're no longer this terrifying villain that turns up, they're just sort of part of the supporting cast in a way. They're a sort of recurring character, at least once per series. The Dalek and so the Doctor will drift into each other's orbit.
Yeah, that does seem to be how they treat the Daleks now. I guess because they the Daleks is such an important part of the show and such an important part of its marketing that they kind of have to be in every series. And rather than like writing a plot based around them that sometimes seem a bit forced, like we must have the Dalek adventure, it's nice to just put them in the background to another story that's about something else. So therefore they can be in the trailer and they can be in the show, but like they don't have to like come up with a Doctor versus the Dalek story this time.
I don't know. We don't know what's coming, but it sounds like this sort of multi-master story they're doing with both Michelle Gomez and John Sim might be the finale. And if so, I guess maybe this is his last play with the Daleks, so who knows. If they get both Gomez and Sim in the same episode and don't find some way of doing the regeneration scene, I'll be disappointed. In fact, that's very much, another instance of pulling out Chekhov's gun, sheet of glass, or Doctor Who actor, and then not pulling their trigger.
So yeah, no, it's got to happen. And also, I'm looking forward to seeing John Sim come back as the Master, because he was very good in the role with David Tennant.
Yeah, I do somewhat think I should place my bets on Missy triggering her own regeneration by killing John Sim. I feel like that sounds like something that will happen.
Probably.
I stress I have no sources, but if this series ends with Missy talking to her own just regenerated self, then you heard it here first. Pure speculation.
Next, we will be discussing Fast 8, or Fast and the Furious 8, or Fate of the Furious to some people.
This 8 Fast, 8 Furious.
Also 8 Fast, 8 Furious, or
yes,
or just Fast and the Furious written down 8 times.
Yep.
This is the 7th sequel to The Fast and the Furious. This film stars Vin Diesel, Michelle Rodriguez, Jason Statham, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, and a host of other supporting people, such as Ludacris and various other figures from previous Fast and the Furious films. As usual, they drive cars, get mixed up in spy antics, and talk about family in a very masculine way. Nick, I believe this is the first time you've seen a Fast and the Furious film, so what did you think of it?
Well, it's obviously aggressively stupid, but at least it's aware of it. Saying, this Fast and Furious film is a bit silly, is a bit, my dog keeps woofing, this bear keeps shitting in the woods, or whatever. Yeah, it was, I went in expecting sort of knowing silliness and OTT action, and I mostly got it, really. To be honest, I kind of, with the reputation the series has, I was hoping it would be a bit more, soaring over the top. I mean, to be fair, the first 2/3 were pretty ridiculous. They include Vin Diesel winning a race while on fire, and The Rock basically starting a prison riot with his biceps, and another massive set piece which ends with cars literally raining from the sky. It's pretty crazy. And the final third goes into a perhaps slightly pedestrian infiltrate the base bits, and then there's a a chase on an ice flat, which is an enjoyable bit of car racing, but as a newcomer, it didn't really feel like an escalation. It felt, if anything, like the sort of silly action part climaxed with the city chase, which is about 2/3 through, and then after that, a slight reduction. But yeah, it was pretty fun. It was just perhaps missing one last euphoric, like really mega action sequence to send me out in fits of glee.
There was quite a good bit with a submarine. I quite like the submarine bit at the end. They always come up with some like insane transport-related stunt to pull. There's like the sixth one involves like a tank going down a motorway. The seventh one has like a bit when they're being pursued by a drone. Yeah, and this one there's like a bit when like a submarine is sort of surfacing from below an ice sheet that they're all driving on, which is pretty good. I mean, yeah, I completely agree with you that this film is pretty much exactly what you'd expect it to be from the trailers, the posters, or the 7 previous Fast and Furious films. It's not really doing anything original, but doesn't have to. It's very fun. Some great action scenes. I quite like the bit early on when there's like they're trying to escape from some villains and they kind of unleash like this enormous wrecking ball that goes swinging through the streets. So they have to drive around. That was
amazing as well, yeah. Yeah, it was good. Obviously, having not seen the rest of the films, I can't really comment extensively on the characters. The Rock is obviously this sort of raw force of charisma. He's just an incredibly entertaining, watchable man. I don't think he has an actual plot or development here. He has a slightly thin enemies becoming friends relationship with Jason Statham, but he's basically just such a charismatic man that having him on the screen is good.
Yeah, they've got a great cast they've built up over the past like 7 films. I think they did kind of take it up a level around, I think, Fast and Furious 5 or something, when they introduced The Rock as a recurring main character. Yeah, and in the last one they introduced Jason Statham as another recurring main character. The characterization is, yeah, obviously, as you'd expect, quite light. They introduced a new villain, this time Charlize Theron, playing a villain called Cypher. They did the thing they do, a lot of action movies do, which is to reveal that this villain was actually the villain behind like the previous 2 or 3 films' villains. Yeah, and it's fairly standard action movie stuff. It's very entertaining. It's got, there's humour in it. Like you say, charisma and humour, which I think is kind of what makes it sort of enjoyable to watch. The fact that like it doesn't take itself seriously. The action scene at the end with Jason Statham on the plane is quite funny, as well as being a good action scene.
It's very funny. It's basically comedy action at this point. I mean, Jason Statham seems to be playing this sort of lovable, incredibly violent scamp. I gather he was the villain in the previous film. He seems to basically just be a bit of a lovable rogue at this stage. He's just enjoying himself. His prison scene with him and The Rock smashing their way out of this prison by hand is possibly the best bit of the film, actually. It's certainly one of the best scenes. I mean, that bit was so amazing that it almost seems a shame that most of the rest of the action sequences take place behind the wheel of cars. I kind of wanted to see The Rock just walking through more people, to be honest. It's like the action sequences in Luke Cage, really. He's just this, like, human pile driver. Except in Luke Cage, they spend about 4 hours explaining why he can do this. And in Fast and Furious, The Rock can just do this because he's The Rock.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, yeah. They can kind of get away with it because it's done in this kind of, like, humorous, not particularly serious way. They can get away with, like, sort of, crazy things. The fact that everything has to involve a car in one way, shape, or form. I like the fact that also that, like, there is, like, a continuing sort of story from those, like, an arc plot, I guess, of across these, which is not and I don't mean the quite ridiculous villain and spy plot that they have for this film that didn't really hold together. It's more the whole thing is this kind of continuing story of this family. Like in this film, they bring back a character from Fast and Furious 5, I believe, who was Vin Diesel's his character's love interest from that film, when his current love interest, who was the original love interest, was temporarily dead.
Oh, God.
Because it's basically, at this point also, Fast and Furious is basically a soap opera with people kind of dying and coming back from the dead and betraying each other dramatically and falling in and out of love. Yeah, they brought back a previous love interest of Vin Diesel and had her held hostage, which meant he had to work for the villain against his family, which put the family under great stress. But at the end, they come together. As a family, and it ends as almost every Fast and Furious film seems to end, with them all having a meal, which is, again, I quite like the humour of it. Like after all this testosterone-driven car racing, it always ends with them having a meal, and the family is reunited.
I don't know. Maybe I just haven't seen enough of his movies, but I haven't really worked out how I'm meant to like Vin Diesel. Especially when he's in a film up against, like, The Rock and Jason Statham, who are both incredibly charismatic, and Vin Diesel just always looks kind of stroppy. And his I'm a traitor but not really storyline, yeah, it was obvious he was never really betraying them. I mean, I know they were never trying to pretend otherwise, but the stakes were a bit weird. I mean, what was the worst that could happen? They might accidentally kill him whilst trying to bring him back on board. I don't know. I was just there for the big action scenes, really. I was I just didn't care about Vin Diesel. Sorry, Vin Diesel.
The thing that didn't really work so much in the film is the kind of spy plot line involving like Cypher taking control and manipulating the Vin Diesel character. Again, it's not particularly strong, but like it's not many people really like that invested in the spy plot. I think, like say, if you are invested in the ongoing story, it's more just about the family and the characters. The scrape they end up in this week is usually largely incidental.
The villain was terrible as well.
Again, I wasn't really there for whatever spy stuff they get mixed up in this time. It's more about just being there for the charismatic acting, the comedy, and the crazy car driving.
No, it's just, it seems a shame they didn't take the opportunity to, I don't know, either hire a better, well, they hired Charlize Theron, who, to be fair, who, as shown in that Mad Max film a couple of years back, is perfectly good at doing a charismatic performance, but they didn't seem to write a particularly good part for her. She's one of these evil hackers, which just leads to lots of awful movie TV hacking where you just type quickly while saying computer words. They've locked me in, they've locked me out, they've locked me all about. I mean, thankfully it didn't take up that much of the finale. Like, there was a bit of action hacking, and then they just went back to driving around. But yeah, action hacking remains terrible.
Yeah, cyber warfare and Hollywood's obsession with cyber warfare is something it does need to get over because it is really poor at being visually represented.
Oh yeah, it's as the modern world advances more towards it being more important what you can access and what information you have rather than whether you've got a machine gun. Their attempts to dramatise this shift by just having lots of people typing while spouting bullshit they haven't really mastered that yet, which is impressive considering they've been trying since, the 80s, the 90s?
Yeah, since War Games or something like that.
But yeah, I mean, I can pick at the things that don't quite work, such as Vin Diesel's slightly empty plotline and the villain and the fact that the final action sequence was a bit of a letdown. But as a whole, it moves along perfectly well. Everyone's very charismatic. All the cars are perfectly well destroyed. Yeah, fair enough. I see why people like these. I gather, based on reading reviews reviews by people who have seen the whole series, that this is seen as a bit of a slight step down in quality compared to, 5, 6, 7. So maybe I should go back and watch those. I don't know. Maybe that will deliver the real, stupid adrenaline rush I'm after.
It's interesting. This is the first film they've done that doesn't have Paul Walker in it. Or I think he might have skipped one of the earlier ones, maybe Fast and Furious 3. But yeah, this is the first film they made since Paul Walker died. And one thing I did kind of feel about this film is there is a sort of Paul Walker-shaped hole in it, which is that part of the family isn't there. They didn't kill off his character. They mentioned him once or twice. I know that's pretty much it. And I felt that he had the Paul Walker, Vin Diesel characters, which is what the whole sort of thing's been built around, had a really good dynamic, and that was by necessity missing from this film. And they've introduced a new supporting character who could be sort of a replacement Paul Walker in the future. But maybe one of the reasons why this film didn't quite land as well as the others is it was missing the crucial elements of the dynamic. And maybe I think why Vin Diesel's character didn't come across so well is because it was missing that important part of it, which is his friend. They sort of riff off each other.
Yeah, maybe. As I say, it's fine. It's perfectly fun. I have no idea what Paul Walker did or didn't do. But yeah.
It seems very much like this is the kind of the established way to do blockbusters now, which is this kind of ridiculous action plus a sort of self-aware sense of humour. I feel very much in this podcast, when we keep discussing these big franchise blockbusters, what we keep coming back to is if the action's good and it's got a bit of humour to it, then we seem to like it. And this film very much, as we seem to agree, it's good, but doesn't transcend, which is something we said before, because I think we've kind of seem to have arrived at a point as pop culture when this is the model for our main blockbusters, which is these ongoing franchise that have to have kind of action and a bit of humour.
I think this is slightly more aggressively, this is silly and doesn't matter, than, say, the Marvel films. The Marvel films, I think, because that's their, even more, to a bigger extent, because they have these individual character films or whatever, they want you to care about the individual characters a bit more, whereas I don't get the feeling the Fast and the Furious wants me to care that much.
No, but they are seen to working along the same kind of blueprint. You don't seem to get many hugely successful, straightforward comedies or straightforward serious action movies. It tends to be the ones that kind of, everything has to have, that sense of humour in it. We watched the trailer recently for Thor Ragnarok, and it was definitely we must get at least one good joke into this trailer.
I don't know, this is the tone of Hollywood, mainstream blockbusters going back to Star Wars and Indiana Jones, isn't it? I mean, this tone by itself isn't something that's appeared in the last 10 years. It's just something that has become increasingly the only thing Hollywood does because Hollywood is increasingly risk-averse.
Yeah, I'm not complaining or saying it's a criticism. I just thought this was an interesting... Because when I was writing up the notes for what we're going to say today, I was thinking about how what I have to say about Fast and Furious 8 is quite similar to what I've said about quite a lot of other sort of action movies that I've liked. while I've been doing the podcast. And I mean, yeah, I don't think as you say, it's not a new development, but I do, yeah, kind of, I don't know if there's anything I've learnt whilst doing this podcast, that this seems to be like the best way to make, or the most successful, enjoyable way to make these franchise blockbusters.
Well, certainly the broadest way. Certainly the way it will get you the most bums on seats / money, yeah. I mean, I think it's more apparent, perhaps, in Fast and Furious, because I really don't think the Fast and the Furious is aspiring to anything at all other than charisma, action, jokes. I mean, like, Captain America Civil War, for all that it is somewhat heavy on charisma, action, jokes, does at least think it's trying to say something, or think it's trying to have some resonance. Whereas the one storyline that is trying to have some dramatic resonance here, the Vin Diesel one, is so tossed off that it might as well not be there. Yeah,
I think, like you say, a Marvel film is drawing on a much longer history of the characters. And that and they've got to make you kind of more emotionally invested in the characters to keep you coming back seeing the films. Whereas the Fast and Furious, they've got to keep the car related action impressive enough. They've got to have their impressive stunt in the trailer to keep you coming back. So yeah, there is a difference and stuff. But like I think as you say, that combination of like charisma, action, joke is like the winning formula for films. There's a really interesting Helen Lewis article that we can link to in the show notes, talking about Marvel, which says that Marvel has got this kind of ketchup flavor, which is that ketchup is really popular because it goes with everything. And Marvel kind of format, that's something we are, I think, discovering the more we do this podcast, is that Marvel format of kind of, yeah, as you say, charisma, action, jokes does go with everything and is the kind of a good, that seems to be the successful template to make films around. And Fast and the Furious 8 is very much a part of that.
Yeah, but I don't think it has quite the same tone of Joss Whedon-y, snappy banter as the Marvel films have. I think, to be honest, these films make more money than the Marvel films, don't they? Like, except for maybe the very biggest ones. Like, these are more popular than them.
I guess they've got like some of the biggest stars, of Hollywood in these films. Like, The Rock is, I think, one of the highest grossing actors around. Like, his films, he's very, very popular. Plus, like, there's always an impressive sort of stunt in the trailer. And again, there is like this ongoing arc plot of a family and characters that you are invested in to a degree, which is what keeps people coming back.
Well, yeah, although that's less the charisma action jokes thing and more the slow morphing of films into television, or at least the increasing level of serialization, because they've become aware that people want that more than they want some brilliantly formed standalone thing. And the amusing part is, most of the time, this sort of character consistency stuff isn't even done particularly well. It's just sort of the vague idea of it. Like, I've not seen any other Fast and Furious films, but I gather Jason Statham in this one is basically a different character to Jason Statham in the previous one. There have been various occasions where things like the 4 films have ended with Thor being banished to Asgard, or Loki being king now or something, and subsequent Thor appearances have not mentioned it at all. Love interests and stuff just come and go. I know that's more actor availability rather than not giving a shit, or contracts, or just deciding actually that storyline hasn't worked, we're just going to forget about it. But yeah, the character consistency is often actually quite barely even there. I mean, that's before we even get into the weird swamp of the X-Men films.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting point. They usually seem to move the characters to where it's necessary for them to be for the next film. So a lot of the time in these films, they introduce a character as a villain for the dynamic of a film. And then in the next film, well, they don't want to just repeat what they did in the last one. So they move that character from the villain column to the hero column and put in another villain. Like, they introduced The Rock in Fast and Furious 5, I think, as a sort of antagonist in the fact that he was like a cop who was sort of sent to capture them all. And then they kind of somehow set aside all of their cop versus robber things that were going on to make them all be friends.
Well, yeah, and it's why films try to do this sort of serialization and sort of hash it out. Because obviously the film has to just focus on the big exciting bit. A TV show could have like 2 or 3, I don't want to say filler, but 2 or 3 not that epic, not that life-changing episodes where the characters move slowly from one position to another. Things like The Fast and the Furious, now they want to jump to the next big thing, rather than have to do like a slightly downscale film where the characters just, slowly change characterization. There's not really time for that sort of thing. You just have to go, well, now Jason Statham's a hero. Okay.
Yeah. But it works.
It works in that it's watchably entertaining, but this is pretty much the pinnacle of this is watchably entertaining, but probably not actually good that I can sort of tolerate.
Next, we will be discussing the 3rd season of Better Call Saul, the Breaking Bad prequel, focusing on the character of Saul, played by Bob Odenkirk. The 2nd series ended on a cliffhanger, and the 3rd series picks up pretty much exactly where the last one ended. We've had a chance to watch the first 2 episodes. Nick, What do you think of the show so far?
Yeah, wow, this show sure loves process, doesn't it? I mean, I saw this pointed out in an online article just before watching the first 2 episodes of Season 3, I think possibly on the AV Club, and it's hard not to see it once you've had it pointed out to you. The endless loving sequences of how exactly Saul rips off someone, or how exactly this bit of crime, like Mike with his little trick to turn the tracker back on its owner, or that stakeout at Los Polos Hermanos with Saul just sitting there watching everyone. Yeah, they really love showing you exactly what's going on in every moment of every sequence. Which, of course, is why it's got a reputation as being quite slow. These long process montages all take 5 to 10 minutes each, which often means only about 7, 8, 9 things actually happen in each episode.
That is definitely the dynamic of the show, which I gotta say I love. Once you pointed it out to me, I think after I'd seen the first episode, or maybe just before I saw the first episode of this series, as soon as I realised that, I could, you can't not see that the focus on process that the show has. But I really like it. I like the fact that sort of everything's done in this kind of drawn out way. It's refreshingly different. A lot of shows are quite fast paced and action focused. I like the fact that this one is slower paced, but still tense. It means that when the big dramatic payoffs happen, they seem really, really weighty. And the fact that they go into the detail with everything really brings out the character and makes it seem very realistic, that you know exactly what Mike's doing in order to track down the person who's following him. It makes you completely believable. It's not like, oh, he's done a magic thing with a box and now he's found the solution to his problem. It's like you completely are there with the character because of the detail that this show goes into, and it's what I really like about the show.
Well, yeah, I think you say a lot of shows are fast-paced, but as I've said / moaned before, a lot of shows nowadays clearly aspire to be premium telly, and therefore they're actually quite slow-paced. I mean, the biggest, most train-wrecky example we've had of this is probably Iron Fist a couple of episodes back. The level of style in Iron Fist is not high enough to carry the incredibly slow pacing. I've started watching Iron Fist again in the last week to try and just get it over with before Defender starts, and it still really isn't. But in Better Call Saul, yes, it's incredibly slow-paced, but the level of style, what's actually happening is interesting, the way it's showing it is interesting, the characters have been developed enough in good ways that you actually care about what these things are and how they relate to them. So yes, somewhat refreshingly, I guess, it sort of comes back to quality. This is a good enough show, a well-made enough show to carry this sort of obsession with process it's decided to have.
Definitely. And it's got great characters at the core, which I think is what part makes it. The other thing that I really like about this show and what makes it really good is Bob Odenkirk himself, who is just great in this role. He's a really good actor. And if it wasn't for him, I think the show wouldn't be able to carry its sort of slightly strange approach to storytelling. Because even when there's like an extended sequence of Saul staking out a diner, Bob Odenkirk is just so watchable in this role, and like just brings brilliant bits of humor, and a real human warmth to the character. I mean, so when he's just kind of like awkwardly stalking someone around a chicken restaurant, it's just so watchable because Bob Odenkirk is so good. He's good at the comedy stuff. He's good at the drama bits. He's really does make you think of Saul as this like developed like 3-dimensional character.
Yeah, and Mike as well. I quite liked that episode 2 actually had Mike and Jimmy /Saul /Jimmy working together again, because as reminded by that stakeout bit in episode 2, they were a good double act, and it was kind of a shame, but they were basically separated by the plot for most of season 2. I'm hoping that this is the start of more sort of Mike Jimmy stuff.
They are great together. The actors riff off each other very well, and like I say, that kind of big dramatic bit in the second episode when they stake out the chicken restaurant is a really good scene because the two characters work so well together, and like the slow build up to this kind of a big payoff is because of the slow process and the fact that it builds slowly, but when it gets to where it's going, if you really feel it as a viewer, it's more emotionally intense. It's just really deftly done. The people who write the show know exactly how to pace it so that like it's tense and interesting, and they've got some great people in it.
It always feels like something a person would actually do, but it's also clever and unpredictable enough to not be obvious. Like Chuck's big scheme to entrap Jimmy in episode 2. We'll probably do some spoilers, by the way, to be honest. I mean, certainly there's a major returning character from Breaking Bad who has been in some trailers and who we're going to spoil in a minute. So if you're concerned with spoilers, I think they're going to start leaking through pretty soon. But yeah, Chuck's big scheme to entrap Jimmy in episode 2 is, just the right level of convoluted for someone like Chuck. It's a very good level of sort of character writing. Like the bit in episode 1 where he makes his fake slip and lets Ernesto know about Jimmy's confession is sort of one of these bits where you go, well, surely someone as intelligent as Chuck wouldn't be stupid enough to make that slip. And it's one of these occasions where you sort of think that was slightly off, and then an episode later the show lets you know, yes, we knew it was slightly off. It was slightly off on purpose. in many ways that was the plan. And you go, it's a good show.
Yeah, that is pretty much exactly what happens. But also the reason why it works is because of the slow-paced, detailed characterization in Series 1 and Series 2. We know the relationship between Jimmy and Chuck very well. We know all the stuff that's behind it, what's driving the show. We know the characters so well and how they relate to each other. So when Chuck's laying this kind of elaborate sort of web to entrap Jimmy, you kind of know exactly why he's motivated to put this much effort into entrapping his own brother. Because you know the characters so well, you know them as well as you know real life people.
It's been a while since I watched season 2. In fact, obviously, I don't tend to rewatch many things, so it's been since season 2 was first airing since I watched season 2. But it does feel like we're coming towards some bigger climaxes here. It does feel like this is maybe going to be a season where things start to come together. Maybe, I mean, I know people have been vaguely saying that since the first one, but Saul potentially being caught for his fraud and Mike getting entangled with, as I say, full spoilers, Los Pollos Hermanos, and therefore Gus has returned. Or, well, has first appeared, since this is a prequel.
Yeah, I think you're right. There is a sense of it's building towards something bigger and more dramatic, or more explosive than has been in the previous series. There's certainly a real sense of portents in this series. I mean, there's a great moment when we see the extended process of Mike tracking down the person who's following him and see that sort of played out in detail. And it culminates with him arriving at a fast food restaurant. And then the camera slowly pulls back and you get the reveal that it's Los Pollos Hermanos from Breaking Bad. And it's a big reveal. And you're like, that's a moment of like, okay, we're really building towards something, something significant happening now or explosive. And it was a really great reveal. It was so good, actually, that I instantly went back and watched it again because I wanted to appreciate that for a second time. When Gus appeared again, it was sort of slowly teased and then revealed that there was like when Jimmy's in the chicken restaurant.
And you see that pale yellow shirt sort of coming towards you.
Yeah, and you can tell there's another character just out of shot, and they do a good job of kind of like structuring the scene so you're kind of aware what's going on around Jimmy. And then again, there's a sort of slow. You see his shirt, and then you see the character, and there's a big reveal that like, oh yeah, it's Gus from Breaking Bad.
The Los Pollos Hermanos thing is building obviously on our pre-knowledge of Breaking Bad, which is weird in a way because a lot of this show has done quite an impressive job of building stuff itself and not relying too heavily on it's them, remember them from Breaking Bad. But it does mean that when they do, bring in some Breaking Bad concepts, it does at least have, a lot of impact still. Like, it's interesting to see how the slightly bigger, more upscale drug dealing business of Gus is going to play into this small, niggly setup they've got in Better Call Saul. Whether this means that Mike and Jimmy are just going to pick around the sides, or whether we're going to, plunge into the inner workings of Gus's evil empire. Or if it even exists at this point. I mean, he's clearly doing some sort of crime. I think the established idea is that Los Pollos Hermanos was always a front for drug smuggling, wasn't it?
That's what I always believed it is. We know from the end of the second series that the Gus is involved to some degree with the Mexican cartel characters.
He hates them, doesn't he? He always had his... I don't know, spoilers for quite an old episode of Breaking Bad now. His undoing at the end was his sort of obsession with taunting Hector, so I don't think he's a fan.
But even in the second series of Better Call Saul, it's established that there is a relationship between them, an antagonistic relationship. Gus must be involved in criminal activity at this point. We already know that he's in some way connected to the Mexican cartel characters who were introduced in the last series. It is starting to link up and at least set the stage for the events of Breaking Bad, as well as telling a story in its own right. Like, one of the problems with the Star Wars prequels is that they just didn't really tell us enough of a story in their own right. They just kind of maneuvered the pieces into position for the original Star Wars. And there's a great Nathan Dighton piece when he says that like this is really lacks drama and tension because you know what's going to happen if they're just maneuvering pieces into position. You know exactly what's coming because you've already seen where everything ends up. What makes Better Call Saul better than the Star Wars prequels is that it is telling a story in its own right, that there's a sense of suspension about and dramatic tension. So we don't know where the story of, Saul and his brother mainly, we don't know where that's going. So it is telling a story in its own right. But also, as you say, maneuvering the pieces into position for Breaking Bad, which is why it's nice when we see the chicken place or when we see Gus.
There was a lot of hinting in Breaking Bad that there was something about Gus. Like his Gus thing is an assumed name, and there's something in his background that makes him important, or that he has some kind of past. Like there's a bit where he walks out in front of gunfire and they don't kill him because they know who he is or something.
Yeah, I remember. That's a big dramatic moment.
Yeah, I don't think Breaking Bad ever told us specifically who he is. I don't know whether bringing him back in Saul is their chance to finally dive into that.
Considering the show has a very detailed approach to characterization, I can imagine we'll be getting some more detailed characterization of Gus. The only other show I can think of that does like a similar thing is Mad Men, which again really slowly built up the characters over like a long period of time, to the point where you can really sort of understand who they are and what's going on.
I quite like the Kim character, as hopefully she won't be too excluded from the show by them focusing more on the sort of crime story. Considering that she's not in Breaking Bad, and considering that she obviously surely eventually has to just decide she can't put up with this horseshit anymore and leg it. I don't know. I mean, to be honest, at this point, the endings for the Kim character are just getting away from him or death. Probably. Who knows which it'll be. Yeah, I mean, I have seen, some concern about whether the introduction of the Gus drug cartel stuff, which is obviously quite a big new plot element, will push out some of the Saul stuff. But at this point, I'm kind of happy to trust they know what they're doing. There's 8 episodes to go. We'll see where we are at the end of the season. Okay, and lastly, this fortnight, we will be talking about my recommendation from the previous episode, which is Ultimate Spider-Man. The first storyline, I think, basically. The first 7 issues, or the first collected paperback, if that's what you got. This is by Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley, with a co-plotting credit to Bill Gemas, although I'm not quite sure what he did. He left after the first storyline, so... But yeah, it's basically written by Brian Bendis, drawn by Mark Bagley, and these first 7 issues focus on retelling Spider-Man's origin for what was then a modern audience. Depressingly, this is now nearly 20 years old. Well, 17 years old. It came out around 2000. It was the start of the Ultimate line, which reimagined various Marvel characters in a similar sort of contemporary way. There was Ultimate X-Men, the Ultimates, which was the Avengers for some reason. There was Ultimate Fantastic Four, which clearly has too many adjectives. And yeah, anyway, the first storyline of Ultimate Spider-Man, he gets his powers, Uncle Ben dies, he fights the Green Goblin. It's a very influential comic in terms of style. I think there was a lot of imitation of this. There was a lot of, this has been incredibly successful, let's do more of this. So yes, it's very good. It's a classic in my eyes. Alastair, what did you think?
It's a great story, primarily. There's a reason why they keep coming back to Spider-Man, and that's because it is a great story and a great character, which you very much get in this Ultimate Edition. Yeah, it's got the sense of, unlike, other superheroes, Batman or Superman, or, his non-superhero life isn't particularly enviable. He's a kid at school, he's picked on, he's bullied. He has a pretty awesome alter ego and sort of superhero life, but his regular life is a bit crap, which makes him very relatable. And it's interesting reading this because, this obviously tells the Spider-Man origin story, which is a story we have seen quite a lot. Like, we've seen it through twice in films now, plus various, other comic and TV cartoon versions. But this kind of version of the story is, I think, the one I like the most, more than the one that's in the films or things like that, because it gets the character so well. He's got this wisecracking, slightly sort of sarcastic tone that certainly I think the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man didn't have, and not really the Andrew Garfield.
They tried a bit in the Andrew Garfield one, but they didn't really hit it. There's one funny scene and that's about it.
It's hard to do well to get the tone right. I think the Spider-Man cartoon that they was on when I was a kid got it pretty well, and so far it looks like the Spider-Man from Captain America Civil War will also has that tone.
That's looking promising, yeah. I'm sure we'll be telling you about that in June or July or whenever, when that film comes out. But yeah, we'll see.
Of all the various different Spider-Man origin stories I've seen, this one is clearly the best, and I can see why it's so influential, and other things have tried to play off it, because this is kind of the gold standard Spider-Man origin take. I mean, this Tobey Maguire Spider-Man did seem to be, I don't know, because it came out not long, after this, maybe kind of 2 or 3 years, I guess, after this was published, did seem to be very heavily, this is what they were going for. And I can see why they looked at this version of Spider-Man and be like, this is kind of the best one, so we should take this.
Yeah, but it is paced very sort of cinematically or possibly televisually. There's lots of conversations, chatty dialogue, sort of wordless emotion or wordless process sequences. Not to a Better Call Saul degree, but there are some. I mean, the obvious joke people always do is that the original Spider-Man origin story, the actual first one in the 60s, was 10, 12 pages, whereas here's Brian Bendis doing it in 100, 120. But at the same time, the Lee Ditko version reads like a montage, whereas this reads like a really resonant bit of contemporary storytelling, so...
Yeah, it feels like a story. There's they set the pieces up before he becomes Spider-Man. They introduce his family and, Osborn and his relationship to Osborn and his relationship to Mary Jane and what his school life is like. So it's all there.
Yeah, but I did wonder, giving you this, whether your response would basically be, yeah, this is quite well done, but I really didn't need to read the Spider-Man origin again. But
we have seen a lot of Spider-Man origins.
That, so.
Yeah, we have seen a lot of Spider-Man origins, but this one I think really is interesting to read because reading this, you kind of see what all the others are trying to do, which is kind of the missing piece of the puzzle, I suppose, from my point of view. This is what they were all aiming for.
Yeah, which is weird considering obviously Spider-Man had been around for the best part of 40 years before this even existed. But yeah, I think this has become a bit of a definitive volume in the last 17 years.
Yeah. The other thing I really liked about it is the art is really beautiful. Like, it's just the characters are drawn really well, and their faces are really expressive. And even like when he's wearing a Spider-Man mask, his face is still really, really expressive. And like the way the character is drawn is like really detailed. And yeah, the characters are given real definition. So I think, yeah, the artwork especially deserves praise.
Mark Bagley, yeah, he's sometimes seen as a bit of a sort of workman-like superhero artist, because his stuff isn't always, like, graphically beautiful in the way that some art is. Like, we did The Old Guard recently, and that has some, like, really lovely designed graphic images in it. Whereas Bagley he's not really showing off in that way. Not that it's bad to try and, produce lovely graphic images in your comics, but Mark Bagley is very much just telling the story in a very slightly burying himself in it way. He's very good at doing emotion. Like, Brian Bendis has talked about how one of the reasons there are often a lot of sequences without any dialogue in Ultimate Spider-Man is because he pulls the dialogue off the page because he thinks Mark Bagley has basically communicated it fine, just in the art.
Yeah, again, it's a visual medium, and they can tell the story visually without the need for dialogue, which is good. They're using the full kind of range of tools that are available. It's just really nice to look at. There's something kind of about the way they're drawn that is really enticing. It's kind of hard to put my finger on it. I don't know comic art well enough.
He's a very classic artist. I mean, if you see a picture of Spider-Man on, I don't know, a towel, a beach ball, or some pants, there's a reasonable chance that Mark Bagley drew it. Not like personally, he's not like going and drawing on people's pants, but he did. His Spider-Man art, especially his Ultimate Spider-Man art, is quite heavily used in like licensing and stuff. He's seen as drawing a very classic, definitive Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I get from this story. This is kind of the definitive take on Spider-Man, the way it was good to read. It's definitely, I think, the favourite version. I think the 60s one probably will have, I don't know, I guess it's not dated so well, which is why this is kind of, again, your gold standard Spider-Man.
Steve Ditko's art does have a certain crisp niceness to it. He does do emotion well as well, but obviously you're reading it through this filter of the period. It's 60s art. It's quite sort of roughly coloured. There's not much detail. Stan Lee's dialogue, you certainly have to read it through a sort of I'm reading something from the past filter. And, this is 17 years old. It is starting to show its age as well a bit, I think. There are a few, I think there are a few moments where I was reading Brian Bendis' teen dialogue, which probably seems quite current and contemporary in the year 2000, but now reads a bit clunk. But it doesn't affect the story for me personally. Maybe it would if I was an actual teenager now.
But I think it's a good depiction of teenagers. It shows the kind of the dynamics of high school well, and how the sort of tensions between characters, they're not like permanently at each other's throats, but they're not always like bestest of friends. My girlfriend is rewatching now Veronica Mars, and I've been seeing like a few episodes with her. And again, that is a really good depiction of teenagers and what they're like and how they relate to each other, which is also what I'm getting from Ultimate Spider-Man. It is a really good depiction of what it's like to be a teenager. It resonates with my memories of being a teenager.
I think those are actually quite contemporary with each other. I mean, like, this is... I think if this is anything, I think this is Spider-Man filtered through the sort of Buffy, Veronica Mars type teenage genre shows we were getting around that time.
Yeah, I think Buffy is kind of the creator of that kind of line of teen dramas. And it's like, again, it's the one they all look to.
It's one of these things which it just works because Spider-Man is the eternal teen character, and therefore, yeah, putting him into that sort of teen drama is good. To be honest, it'll never happen because some god somewhere has decided that Spider-Man is a movie character. But a TV show about Spider-Man with sort of a Veronica Mars Ultimate Spider-Man aesthetic is pretty much my gold standard for what I want of a Spider-Man adaptation. I will never get it, but I would like it, and it would be good.
That would be good. I think that would be probably the best way to do Spider-Man. But again, this is what I would want from the forthcoming Spider-Man film. Again, like the teen setting, the school-based, and, with obviously the superhero element added into it. And I think it was definitely that kind of thing was lacking from the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man ones. And it was in this Tobey Maguire ones. It was in the first one, especially. But, I mean, there were good things about the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi Spider-Man films. The second one especially I thought was really good in the way they had Doc Octopus, and Alfred Molina was really good in that role. It didn't get the kind of the teen drama dynamic right, and that's what I really want. And plus the humour, and it needs the kind of the sarcastic humour. Those are the two things I really want in this forthcoming Spider-Man film we got.
Yeah, but it helps that, Brian Bendis is genuinely good at comedy. Spider-Man should really be either actually funny or a bit sort of dad humour-y, groany, and he sort of does both quite well.
Yeah.
And he does have... I mean, Brian Bendis... I mean, I don't know, but let's go briefly into Nick lectures about impact on comics. This comic and Brian Bendis' style took off massively in the early 2000s and did have a lot of impact. Like, what happened in comics in the early 2000s is sort of similar to what I sometimes talk about happening in TV now. Like, Brian Bendis had a few series he was working on. He wrote this comic, he wrote Daredevil for about 50 issues, and he, of course, originally created Jessica Jones, so he was writing that at the same time as well. So yeah, he produced quite a lot of quite influential stuff, and he did sort of pioneer this sort of superhero stories can be 6 issues long instead of 1 or 2, and they can have like long sequences of dialogue or characterization, which led to a sort of comics version of the sort of everything must be premium telly effect I've talked about, wherein everything was suddenly 6 issues long and contained loads and loads of rambling conversations. And obviously not everyone's as good at it as Brian Bendis, so some of those comics were quite bad.
But again, I can see why this has been so influential, because it does tell the story really well, and it's really, really readable. As I was reading, I'd usually read it before going to bed, and I'd say, I'll just read 1 issue, and then you find yourself reading 2 or 3, because you're like, I just really want to find out what happens next, and I just really want to spend some more time with these characters, which is what I really liked about it. I also liked the way it kind of teased out the wider Marvel universe in a very similar way to what the films do. There's a reference at one point to Captain America. There's a reference to the Hulk, I think, at one point. There's a reference to the Kingpin, who I believe becomes a character later in this comic. Yeah, and it's done very much the way that the Marvel films do now, which is they talk about the other films, you know, and they name drop them as part of their kind of broader universe that all the stories sit within.
Yeah, but obviously there were other Ultimate comics, and later on in the series there is like explicit crossovers between them and stuff. But yeah, this was obviously very much the beginning of a whole new thing. This Ultimate line launched 1 month with these few comics, and good bit of trivia, it was originally going to be called Ground Zero Comics, but they changed the name, and then 9/11 happened about a year later.
Yeah, that's fortunate.
Yeah. But yeah, it was an exciting time. I mean, the Ultimate line has kind of tailed off now. It grew a bit overweight in continuity, and of course, do you know who Miles Morales is?
It's a name that sounds familiar, but can't place it.
He was the successor to Das Ultimate Spider-Man. Like, about 100 and something issues in, Peter Parker, Ultimate Spider-Man, actually does die, and is replaced by Miles Morales.
And he's from a Latino background?
He's biracial, I think. He's half black, half Hispanic, yeah. And he takes over as the new sort of relatable teen Spider-Man. And he is still going, but when they folded the Ultimate Universe, he just joins the regular Marvel Universe.
So there's now 2 Spider-Man?
Yeah, the adult Peter Parker, who's been going since the 60s, and the young Miles Morales, yeah. And yeah, Brian Bendis is still writing it 17 years later. He has written Ultimate Spider-Man once a month, basically ever since that comic you've read came out in 2000.
Yeah, and the fact that he's kept it consistent and people are still reading it shows that he's a good writer.
Yeah, I think he has a voice and a shtick, like this sort of back and forth patter, and it is possible to get tired of it. Like, he's one of these writers like, I don't know, like Aaron Sorkin or Stephen Moffat. You know, you can sort of say, is it me or does everyone sound quite similar? And when he's been writing like 4 or 5 comics a month for what's coming up to 20 years, yeah, but when it's new to you or when he's on form, it's really good.
Yeah, I think the Aaron Sorkin comparison is very apt then, because that is definitely how I describe Aaron Sorkin's writing.
Yeah, probably no surprise, but yeah, Brian Bendis loves Aaron Sorkin.
Yeah. The other thing I really like about Spider-Man, well, Spider-Man in general as a character, and which this version of Spider-Man does really well, is that, and this is where you get to drink, because I'm going to mention different types of conflict, but it's
Cheers.
the... Thank you, enjoy. So there's the fact that in Spider-Man there's interpersonal conflict or relationship conflict between Spider-Man and the other, or Peter Parker and the other people in his sort of friendship group. And there's extrapersonal conflict, the big, action set pieces between Spider-Man and the villains, like the Green Goblin. And the fact that the two are related makes the story much stronger. So, Peter Parker has a relationship with Harry Osborn's dad. And, obviously Spider-Man has a relationship with the Green Goblin, an antagonistic relationship that's based around conflict and violence. And the fact that the two work really well together, so that there's developing the personal conflict of Spider-Man, as Peter Parker, as he becomes Spider-Man, the interpersonal conflict of Peter Parker's relationship to these other people, that's key, and the extrapersonal conflict, which is, the superhero fights. And the fact they all work together makes the story really strong. It's something that the Sam Raimi Spider-Man 2 did really well, again, having the relationship between Peter Parker and Otto Octavius, as well as the antagonistic relationship between Spider-Man and Doc Ock, the villain.
Well, yeah, it does, as you say, it does do a good job of setting up this sort of web of relationships and conflicts that will serve him quite well over the 200 and something issues he's written over the last 20 years. Like things like, obviously, there is a cameo from Dr. Octopus in these 7 issues. The Kingpin has been set up. yeah, there were things in these 7 issues that set up Miles Morales being created, that set up Green Goblin, the Hobgoblin.
Yeah, there's a lot of story threads, and you can see they're all going somewhere particular. And again, the characterization is just really spot on. Again, it really does capture that kind of teenage angst. Well, but it's not so much teenage angst, because it's not like angsty per se.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously the main point you have to sell in when you're doing the Spider-Man origin is the point where Peter Parker gets a bit full of himself, is a bit of a dick, lets the burglar go that ultimately kills Uncle Ben, but he's still our relatable, likeable hero. And yeah, I think this version does it fine.
Yeah, it does it very well. And it's a very sad moment when, even though I knew it was coming, you still had a real emotional impact when you see the moment when Peter finds out Uncle Ben is dead. You know, it's very dramatically done, despite the fact I've seen it now, 3 or 4 times through, several films and comics and TV versions and stuff. This time it still had emotional impact because of how well told this story is.
When these comics were first coming out monthly, because I remember that because I'm old, there was a lot of speculation that they were going to kill Aunt May instead of Uncle Ben in this alternate reality, because Uncle Ben has a lot of characterization in those first 4 issues, and Aunt May does, but not as much. And obviously the reason they did that was because, short term they need you to care when Uncle Ben died, and then they've got the rest of the series, the subsequent 100 and whatever issues, to make you care about Aunt May. But there was a lot of speculation about that.
It is handled very well.
Okay, cool. Well, as I say, this is one of my favourite things, so I'm glad you liked it.
Yes, it was good to finally get a chance to read some classic Spider-Man.
There are hardcore fans out there getting quite annoyed at how much we're lauding this as a classic thing, but it's classic to me, so sorry. Okay, so that was Ultimate Spider-Man. Alastair, what's your ultimate recommendation for next time?
Well, as we covered Doctor Who in this episode, I think it's time we watch some classic Doctor Who from, way back in before it disappeared off TV for about 10 years. So,
oh, bloody hell. I should have seen this coming, but somehow I didn't. Interesting.
Yeah. So, obviously, they made Doctor Who for nearly 30 years, between, sort of 1963 and 1989. And there's a lot of stories, and a lot of stories collected together into sort of single, because they would tell a story over about 4 or 5 episodes, and they're sort of collected together under titles. There's a lot to draw on. Some of them are good, some of them are not very good. Obviously, I'm going to go for one of the best. It's hard to choose one standout one, but I've decided that I'm going to be recommending you the classic Tom Baker era adventure, Genesis of the Daleks. The reason for this is partly because this one tells the origin story of the Daleks. So again, you may be interested to find out where they originally come from. Without spoiling it too much, but this is kind of the premise, is the Doctor is sent back in time to the origin of the Daleks to kill them before they come into existence. And as well as it being telling an interesting origin story of the Daleks, it has a really good moral dilemma at its core. The classic, if you had a time machine, would you go back in time and kill Hitler question. Handled here much better than it was in New Who.
Did they dig into this a bit in that 2-parter at the start of last series?
Yes, they had Davros who created the Daleks, and they had, I think there were some references to their first encounter. Genesis of the Daleks is the first time Davros created the Daleks appears.
Okay, cool.
So, I don't think you've seen any classic Who before?
I think I've seen that Paul McGann TV movie, if that counts, but that is about it.
Yeah. Okay, well, this is real classic with, Tom Baker, a very iconic Doctor, so I hope you like it.
Okay, cool. Okay, and that is all of the Moderate Fantasy Violence for this fortnight. Thank you for listening. As ever, if you want more from us, you can go to moderatefantasyviolence.com, where we have a few written articles, a few deleted scenes, and quite a lot of purple. You can also go to iTunes and subscribe, and if you'd like to leave a review, it does apparently help us gain new listeners, so do that. We would appreciate it.
You can also find us on social media. On Twitter, we are at MFV Podcast. And if you go to Facebook, you can search for Moderate Fantasy Violence, and our logo should pop up, and you can follow us there. I've been Alastair Ball. You can also follow me on Twitter at Alastair J.R. Ball, and you can find more of my writing at redtrainblog.com.
And I've been Nick Bryan. You can follow me on Twitter as @NickMB, or again, you can find my writing and other information about my self-published comic books at nickbryan.com. Okay, thank you very much. We'll be back in a couple of weeks with MFV 36, in which we will be covering, I think it's our first Marvel Cinematic Universe film of the year. It's Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. We've also got the first episode of American Gods, adapting Neil Gaiman's novel, and because I love my Damon Albarn music, we will also be looking at the new Gorillaz album, Humans, and the Doctor Who story, Genesis of the Daleks. Okay, bye.
Bye. I'm glad that they've decided to dive into his character more and, you know, sort of expand him as a character. And yeah, you're great. Yes, you're right. They are great to get.
Yes,
yes, Nick is great. And it's something we have also established in 35 episodes of this podcast.
Thank God.